Hi everyone, I know we're getting towards mid-January when I'm filming this, so hopefully it's okay that I'm still doing some 2021 wrap-up stuff because it's just been taking me a little while to get to it. Also, my husband is messing around with a new camera lens right now, so I might be like blue or something in this video. I'm not really sure what's gonna happen, but last time we tried this lens, I ended up checking the video because it was doing like a weird zooming thing, so now I'm probably just going to use it no matter what because I don't want to film this twice. So I have done a little bit of Goodreads magic and a little bit of spreadsheet magic, and I'm just going to go over some of my reading stats from 2021 that I think are interesting. If I was really motivated, I would make like some graphics to throw into this video, but I don't think, let's be honest, I don't have the time for that right now. So I'm just gonna read them to you and hopefully you'll find this interesting. I kind of like seeing when other people do this. I think everyone has their own statistics that they track or think are interesting. So here are some of mine. So in 2021, I read 118 books, which honestly, this is the first year that I've tracked the number of books I read in the full year. I think in 2020, I was estimating a little bit because I only started reusing Goodreads partway through the year. I think I read about 97 books in 2020, but I have the feeling I just left a bunch out that I never tracked. So this is fairly typical for me, I would say. I actually read slightly fewer pages in 2021 than I did in 2020. This has affected my statistics a lot. I ended up reading quite a few novellas in 2021, and I read a few series of novellas. So that really sort of skewed some of the I can't say statistics, not a good sign, since I have to get through the rest of this video. So like I said, I read a lot of novellas in 2021. I actually read 31 novellas, which is, does that add up? I wrote down that it's more than a quarter of the books that I read. What, 30 times 4? Yeah, that would be one. Okay, that's correct. More than a quarter of the books that I read in 2021 were novellas, which I think has got to be a first. Total number of pages that I read, according to Goodreads, which I'm not sure how accurate this is because I don't think I even always put down what editions things were, and some of these were audiobooks, but according to Goodreads, I read 39,629 pages. And my average book length was 335 pages, which actually seems a little bit on the short side to me because I tend to go for longer books, but also I read all those novellas. So I don't know how many books I read that were actually in the 300-page territory, but that was the average. That's why averages are not a very good number, and probably the median would have been more useful, but I don't think Goodreads does that. Now onto some other more specific statistics. Out of those books, 114 of them were fiction and 4 were nonfiction, which is probably horrifying to some people, but I do mostly read for fun. My husband reads a lot of nonfiction, and I think he was 20 or 30% nonfiction last year. And I'm pretty sure all 4 of these nonfiction books are things that he made me read. I'll give both numbers and percentages, I guess, for some of these genres. For fantasy, I read 73 works of fantasy in 2021, which is 62%. And then 31 books were science fiction, which was another 26%. And then sort of in the mystery crime genre, it was 5%, that was 6 books. 3 books that I read could sort of be categorized as business or self-help. Obviously, those were the nonfiction. I read 2 historical fiction books, 2 classics, and apparently that's all the genre, but now I'm wondering where the 4 nonfiction came from because I'm only seeing, oh, maybe the business and self-help was 3%. Maybe that was 4. Maybe all the nonfiction books I read were in that category. Sorry, this is kind of a mess, guys. Also, some of these percentages were rounded, so if you, unlike me, are adding some of this up and you find it's not adding up to 100%, that's because I had to do a little bit of rounding, otherwise it would have been weird. Now let's talk about what I bought, what I got from the library, and just generally the format that I read things in. 67% of the things I read last year were from the library, so that includes both ebooks and audiobooks. No physical books. I have not physically been in a library in I don't know how many years. Well, not since I finished graduate school, but that doesn't count. That was a different kind of library. Then in terms of what I bought 20% of the books that I read in 2021, which sounds kind of high actually. That surprised me, but that is also including like things that I got from Audible and things like that. I already owned 8% of the books I read, which doesn't sound very good, honestly. Don't seem to have included advanced reader copies in here, so we might have a missing percentage. I said 2 of these books were a gift. I'm pretty sure those are just 2 Wheel of Time books that our friend Daniel loaned me or gave to me because he didn't want them anymore. So it wasn't like a birthday present, but more just a like, here, have this. But I still wrote that as a gift because that's what category that the spreadsheet had. Then in terms of actual format, I definitely do a lot of my reading just on my phone from the library, but I also went through a really strong audiobook phase, especially at the end of 2021, the last few months. I listened to a ton of audiobooks, like a lot more than usual for some reason. And for me, sometimes it's like an attention span, but also a comfort thing when I guess I felt more like being read to. So I will, play a game on my phone or on the Switch or something and then listen to a book. Or I wish I could say I got a lot of cleaning done because I listened to audiobooks when I clean, but I don't think that was honestly really it. I think I just was in sort of space out mood where I could listen to something be read to me and just do something else with my hands. 54% of my reading was digital. I think that's mostly from the library, but I bought a few Kindle books, not too many, and I also got a few things as advanced reader copies. I had 29% of my reading was audio this past year, which really surprised me. I think also, I mentioned I read a lot of novellas. I read several long novella series. I think I listened to the entire Penrick and Desdemona series, which are novellas, and I also listened to all of Murderbot, which is mostly novellas. So that's probably like 15 books at least right there. So I feel like that probably skewed those statistics a little bit because they were on the shorter side and I binged them. But there you have it. That's probably the most audiobooks I've ever listened to. Pre-2020, I basically didn't listen to audiobooks at all. I sometimes listened to podcasts or YouTube videos or things like that. And it's only in the last year that I've really started listening to more audiobooks. So obviously reading physically in print is actually the thing I do the least, which is kind of weird because there's a shelf of books right behind me. But that was only 17% of my reading this past year. Also though, if I bought, or brought home 100 books from the library or the bookstore or whatever, then I don't know where I would put them. This place isn't that big. And it's also really nice. I love reading on my phone because when I'm at the grocery store and just in the line or something, I might just be scrolling on Facebook, but if I remember, I can open up Libby instead and start reading a book, and that is much better than just scrolling on Facebook and having all the FOMO. So just a few more statistics that you guys might find interesting. I calculated how many of the books I read in 2021 were published in 2021 and how many were backlist. But then I kind of feel like there were a bunch of things I read, especially at the beginning of 2021, that were new releases that I just hadn't quite managed to get to in 2020. And it felt kind of weird to count those as backlist, so I did a statistic for those as well. So out of the books I read last year, 30 of them were published last year. So that's just over a quarter of all the books I read. And then another 26 books, which is like 22%, those books were published in 2020. So that means almost half the books that I read last year were published in the last couple of years, which is pretty recent. And then I was curious when I saw that. So I calculated how many of the books that I read last year were more than 10 years old. And only 17 of them were, so that's about 14%. So if I do some not very accurate math, that means 38% of the books that I read were older than 2 years, but not yet 10 years old. I don't know if anyone cares about this, but when I was prepping this video and calculating all of these things, at that point in time, I decided it was interesting. And now that I'm reading it to you guys, I'm no longer convinced that that's very interesting. We're almost done, just a couple more things. This is just some of Goodreads, my year in books fun things. According to Goodreads, the most popular book that I read last year was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, which if you've watched my worst books of 2021 video, I didn't really care for. And then the least popular book that I read, and I think by least popular, they mean or most popular, how many people have rated it or saved it to their shelves or whatever. The Scavenger Door by Suzanne Palmer, which was the third book in the Finder Chronicles, that was the least popular book that I read in 2021. And that kind of surprised me because, I know that series isn't too widely read, but I figured I would have read something less popular than that somehow, but I guess that was it. Then Goodreads also helpfully told me that the longest book I read was The Veiled Throne by Ken Liu, thus reminding me I still need to make some videos about the Dandelion Dynasty. And the shortest book that I read was one of the Penric and Desdemona novellas. It was Mira's Last Dance. So I didn't write down how short it was, but I think it was something like 80 or 90 pages. But I listened to it, so I don't know. So those were all of my statistics that I calculated for 2021. The further I got in this video, the less convinced I was that anyone would want to watch it. But let me know what you think, if you've calculated this sort of thing for yourself. How did this compare? Is there anything, if I do this again in a year, is there anything you'd rather see me track that I didn't talk about? Is there anything about my reading habits that horrifies or concerns you? I guess you can let me know about that too. I'm sure some of you will. But thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.